Hello and welcome to another edition of PM Express, the business edition. My name is Philip Nanfuri, and tonight, very simple conversation. Expanding Ghana's stock market. Should we look at compulsory insurance? Is it viable? Is it the way to go? But before we get into all of that, what exactly is the stock market? Yes, you hear it all the time. Stocks are rallying, stocks are plummeting, stocks are going up, stocks are falling. What exactly is the stock market? It's very simple. It's where we buy and sell shares. And what's a share? It's a stake you have in a company. So assuming there's a company that you want to be part of, and it says, you know what, we are going to list on the Ghana Stock Exchange. The company is going to be part of the stock exchange so that you can facilitate, or it can facilitate a buying and selling of its shares. A stock market is simply a place where we all gather and we'll buy and sell shares in a company. It's as simple as that. Anytime you have a stake, you own part of a company, you're referred to as a shareholder or a stockholder. So a stock market is just basically where you buy and sell shares. And anytime you buy or sell, you make some money, depending on how the price of the share you are buying or you are selling at goes either up or down. Another thing, anytime a company makes profit at the end of a financial year, it declares what we call a dividend to its shareholders or stockholders. So a stock market is a place for making money, and it's as simple as that. In our part of the world, and for Ghana specifically, we are used to investing in mutual funds, bank fixed deposits, and other stuff. A stock market is a good place to make some good money. Our stock market is growing. It has some growing to do. If you look at the Ghana Stock Exchange, there are about 41 companies on the Ghana Stock Exchange, as compared to about more than even 7,000, let's say, on the global front, or even in America only, I beg your pardon. 7,000 on their stock exchange. So you realize that we have a bit of growing to do when it comes to the stock market. But it's a good place to make some good money. But tonight we want to find out how exactly and should compulsory listing on the stock exchange. Anytime we say listing, it's a company moving on the stock exchange. Should we make this compulsory? Apart from that, we also hear from the Managing Director of the Ghana Stock Exchange, Mr. Kofi Yamwa, on what exactly his thoughts are on certain companies going on the Ghana Stock Exchange. We also hear from Yolanda Cuba. She's the CEO of Vodafone Ghana, and we find out from her exactly what this whole 4G license comes with. We saw in MTN that they listed on the Ghana Stock Exchange, and the first time a company lists, we call it an IPO, an initial public offering. So MTN now is on the Ghana Stock Exchange, and you can buy and sell shares. And they did a very good job in coming to the market and to explaining to us how we can buy into the MTN brand. Now, we also hear from her, and we'll find out what exactly it entails. Must the company give 30%, 25%? What should they give to get this 4G license? And is it really a requirement? So that's an overview of what we're going to look at tonight. This is PM Express, the business edition. My name is Philip Nanfuri. Now, to help me walk through all these waters and sift through the jargon is a very esteemed gentleman. His name Collins Appiah, and he's a financial economist. He's with Integrity Services, Savings and Loans. Collins, thank you very much for joining me here on PM Express. Without much ado, stock market compulsory listing. We would hear from the MD of the Ghana Stock Exchange very shortly, but we need to put some flesh around our conversation. Stock markets around the world are barometers of business activity, in fact, economic activity. You have a lot of companies on the stock exchange, from telcos to finance companies to health companies to agricultural companies. Ghana, we have 41 companies on the stock exchange out of the thousands we have in the country, and that tells a story on its own. If you go to a country like North America, which is more or less the bellwether for stock market activity globally, we have a lot of companies, and sometimes even hard to keep track of it. Give us a snapshot of the stock market in Ghana in terms of performance, in terms of its attractiveness to individual and institutional investors in making money.
Thank you very much, Philip, and thank you for having me on your program. I think my company that you mentioned is actually Services Integrity.
Services Integrity.
Yes.
Thank you for the
services
correction.
come before the integrity. Yes, I think if you take our stock market, started operation somewhere in 1990 thereabouts. We are talking almost getting to about 30 years now, and we are looking at about 37 to 40 equities. You go to Registrar General and you ask yourself how many companies have been registered, and you do the analysis and you realize that the market is not, in terms of companies that have been listed, is not as expected. And I think that's one conversation that has been on the stock market for some time, why companies not listing. I think later on we'll delve into the reasons why Ghanaians probably are not listing.
Yes, we choose to list or not to list.
Exactly. But I think the topic you chose as to should there be some, should it be compulsory for some companies to list? For me, I think later we'll actually look at the pros and cons, in all this.
Yeah.
My first reaction to this is that, yes, in the development, agenda, there are some areas that maybe you can look at it as a policy, but in other areas you shouldn't. A typical example, I mean, MTN, when they came, or when they wanted to go and get this 4G license, NCA, National Communication Authority, just made it as part of the requirement that, hey, you need my license to operate. The license that I'm going to give you, it means that people are going to subscribe to your network. It means that people are going to do business with you. You are going to make profit with that. As part of that, can you then agree with me that when I get you the license, list at least 35%, in doing that? I mean, it's a negotiation. Either you take the requirement or you decide not to go for the, the license. And I think they agreed. And therefore, in 2018, which was last year, they listed their part, for Ghanaians. And I believe the story is there for people to see, when they came on the market, how people have been, making money on the stock market with MTN shares. Other areas, assuming you have a Ghanaian telecommunication company, will you want to force that person to come and list? Then I ask myself, is it a policy that you want to have such that you are trying to lobby from the foreign guys who are coming? And last week, for instance, we were discussing about this depreciation of our currency. Yeah. And one of the reasons some of us were citing was the fact that most of the companies that are running in Ghana are their profits. Exactly, and they will repatriate their profits outside. So in a way to retain some, or to be able to manage such currency very well, one way is to have such policies. Okay, I will allow you to come to my market, but at least can I have a certain percentage being retained? And that's me, I think, maybe where I would say if government can come out with those policies, it's better for all of us.
Okay, so you see some wisdom in allowing particularly foreign-owned entities to be on the Ghana Stock Exchange for the reasons of repatriation of their profits. Because it seems, and that's the case on the ground, anytime they declare the dividends and they need to return back to the shareholders who are not on the shores of Ghana, they move these funds, and obviously it has to be in foreign currency, and then our currency takes a dip. So that would be some of the reasons that he would advance for companies listing on the Ghana Stock Exchange, just to conserve some of our foreign exchange. Because if you have a foreign company and it goes to the Ghana Stock Exchange and Ghanaians buy into it, then anytime it makes profit and it declares a dividend, what's going to give to you, the shareholder, that one remains in the country. But assuming the company is wholly foreign-owned, makes all the profit, and has to send it back to its shareholders out to the shores of Ghana, it's got to convert what is made in Ghana cedis into dollars and ship it out to the country, ship it out metaphorically. And this is what we see in some of the pressures on the Ghana cedi. I want us to hear from the MD of the Ghana Stock Exchange, Mr. Kofi Nyamwa, on what exactly he had to say when my colleague Ebenezer Sabote spoke to him concerning Vodafone's 4G license. And let's listen on the Ghana Stock Exchange. Let's take a listen to him.
If the company have come to the market and they have indicated their commitment to abide by the continual listing obligations, and the rules are there, and they're doing things that are not in consonance with the continual listing obligations, then the rules needed to be applied. So I will put it this way: investors will thrive more on they seeing that the rules are being applied fairly and equally across board.
Are we expecting any new listing this year?
Certainly, as for listing, it's always our benchmark targets. We intend to go forward campaigning or prospecting, I should use that word, prospecting for companies to come to the market. Companies from small, companies from medium, companies from large, companies from purely private sector, companies from SOE sector.
How far with Vodafone? Have you had any formal engagement with them?
We've not had formal engagement yet. We've started informal engagement, not with the company itself, but with the sector and so forth. And we believe that in due course of time, we'll have the opportunity, if they do accept our invitation, to also have a formal engagement with them.
But has the minister given you any assurance that?
No, I wouldn't put it as assurance. It's informal discussions at this early stage.
Are you also supposed to go through the process like MTN did?
No, from the discussions the informal discussions that we had, it's not about they going through exactly the same process that MTN went through. But that is the point where we believe that even if it's not the same process, in due course of time, the public shareholding should be represented not by what the government currently holds, but by individual members of the general public holding shares in a public listed entity.
Okay, so that was Kofi Yamwa. He's the managing director of the Ghana Stock Exchange, also referred to as our local bears, or where we actively buy and sell shares. And his case is very simple. It should get to a point. You see, in Vodafone's case, 30% is already owned by government. That's one key thing we should put down. 2, he's advocating for a time where, regardless of whether government holds a share in the company, we should see some individual investors like you and I, or even institutional investors, buy into a company. And this is an argument they have held for some time now, because it's one of the good ways of seeing robust activity on the stock market. Prior to MTN listed on the Ghana Stock Exchange, there was no telco on the Ghana Stock Exchange. We are familiar with the banks, with the insurance companies, even with pharmaceuticals, mining companies, oil companies like Tullow, etc. But we've not seen any telecommunications company. And if a stock market is a barometer for growth in an economy, then how can you measure that growth if there is no telecommunication company on your stock exchange? And if you follow the arguments of the Ghana Stock Exchange, you realize that they would like to see more companies list on the Ghana Stock Exchange. Now, they've put in a lot of incentives, even on the lower end, for smaller companies. For example, they have what we call the Ghana Alternative Exchange. It's a parallel market to the Ghana Stock Exchange, where small companies with the potential for growth can list, and they reduce the requirements for you to list. But it's still not being as patronized as they would like. If you talk to any entrepreneur, anytime they want to expand their company, or somebody is starting a company, a startup, the first thing they look out for is borrowing from a bank, without even thinking of allowing somebody like you or me to have a stake in the company. I'll come to my guest and I'll ask him, what are some of the reasons why we don't see an active push in the stock market activity? Because if you talk to any entrepreneur, even any businessman, depending on his type of business, he wants to go to a bank to borrow. What are some of the reasons why people don't want to go to the stock market to look for funds?
I think this discussion for me has been on for some time. One key explanation that comes when it comes to the Ghanaian context, Ghanaians entrepreneurs don't want to share ownership. It's so obvious.
And sorry to cut you, is that a cultural mindset, or?
I think if you want to say culture, yes, maybe partly I will believe, because the way we are trained, or the way we live, as culture being the way your lifestyle, we seem to, if you're a man, They say ututu a trebema or something.
What does that mean?
You know, when anything that happens in a bad or good way should rest on the man's bosom, meaning that if I'm trying to do have a company, I want to establish a business, I want to try everything on myself, and not to let people to come and support me or something like
outside
that.
help.
Exactly. So, and also maybe from an angle of we boast of I own this, I own that, I own this, I own this, I did it myself. That's also another big problem that I think we have as a Ghanaian. You know, we find it difficult to let people join us do business. And I can even say that when it even come to partnership, even trusting you. So culture maybe is one because you find it difficult trusting your friend or trusting your family member to do business with. The trust issue has been a big problem for Ghanaians too, and that translating to even the people willing to come and list on the stock market has been a problem to for that effect. Another issue also has to do with transparency.
Okay.
We are not transparent at all when it comes to doing business. I'm not surprised. I mean, when it comes to the corruption index, I mean, Ghana is one of the places they will say corruption is very visible. People doing business, sometimes they want to evade taxes, so they don't want to open their books to anybody.
Going on the stock market opens you up to
one of the key requirements is on monthly basis you have to publish your account to the regulator, being it the Securities and Exchange Commission and the stock market as well. Investors, because for people trusting to buy parts of your equity means that they have to know how you are performing in terms of your profit and loss, or how the financial position of the business. So and it's the financial that will tell them. If you are not willing to disclose that, how would they know what is happening to the business? You know. So for me, transparency, disclosing information, I think you are aware, even as a national, on the national level, this act they wanted to pass for people to have access to information.
Yes.
You see how long right of information, but you see how long this thing has taken us. And this is for me a big problem that even entrepreneurial level too. I mean, people are experiencing.
Apart from the transparency aspect, the culture aspect, when I was going through the prospectus, and prospectus is what, to viewers and listeners, is what a company will submit to investors for us to go through to judge and see if indeed we want to buy into their company. So let me use MTN as an example. Before they listed, during the initial public offering stages, there was a prospectus where you can go through and see exactly what the company wants to achieve, how much they want to raise, and where the money they're raising is going to go. You realize that if you look at other companies that even want to list, if you look at their prospectus, you see that there's a lot of cost involved when it comes to listing. You have a lot of bills to settle with regards to legal fees. You have to look at the brokers. You have to look at the analysts. A lot of people have to be settled financially. Can we argue that this is one of the reasons why within the Ghanaian context, people would not want to list on the Ghana Stock Exchange?
I think if you pick it from the cost implication or the transaction cost of getting listing, I would say no, because from where I sit, I think I've seen a lot of listing on the market, the prospectus that you mentioned, the fees that the financial advisor will charge, the legal advisors, the stock exchange, and the levy too. Normally, when you put all together, I can tell you it doesn't more or less exceed even 5% of the amount you are trying to raise. And that's why initially the stock exchange made it there was a limit of capital that you can raise on the market. And if you are not able to meet that minimum limit, they don't allow you to list on the market. They realized, then afterwards, they realized that some of the small companies would not need such huge funds. Then they created the gas market, the alternative the alternative market for the amount of money people want to raise to be on the low side. The reason why I said I think the cost is not really a big issue is that, take a typical example, an entrepreneur prefers to go to a bank. How much interest rate are they getting from the banks?
About 26%.
Good.
Average.
So if you are paying 26% per annum, and somebody is willing to charge you not even more than 5% on raising funds freely to go and use in your business, why would you want to consider that? That's why based on this, then I'm saying that I think the problem is really not the cost implication of these charges that come with it. But as I said, I think people are not willing to disclose their books. Sometimes people are not willing to share ownership, and they feel that they are losing, the ownership that is attached to the business, in setting it up.
That's a fantastic point. Comparing debt, as in borrowing from a bank, and taking money from an investor. My guest argues that it's cheaper to take money from an investor rather than go to a bank and pay an interest of 26% on the average for about 2 to 3 years, sometimes even 5. So in his opinion, it's better for you to even go to the stock exchange, to the stock market, look for investors, to put some money in it, become part owners, rather than take on debt. And we see it a lot in our economy. People go to banks, they start defaulting, their businesses go down. If you go to an investor, stock market, for example, they can push in something, own a part of it, and then your business can grow. Apart from that, he also argues that it's the cultural mindset of the Ghanaian. Do you agree with that? Apart from that, the transparency. We like to hide our books, keep everything to ourselves. We don't want to share. Two fantastic points. The cultural mindset of us and the transparency attached. And also a new one. Looking at debt, that's borrowing from banks and other financial institutions. And looking at equity. Equity is also called stocks or shares. Getting an investor to be part of your company. This is PM Express Business Edition. My name is Philip Nanfuri and my guest, Colin Sapia. He's a financial economist. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. This is Business Edition of PM Express and my name is Philip Nanfuri. Before I went to the break, we're looking at two key reasons as to why some companies in Ghana may decide not to list on the Ghana Stock Exchange or the stock market. The cultural mindset and transparency. But one key question remains. If we have these bottlenecks that prevent companies from going on the stock exchange, should we or should we not start making it compulsory? So for example, if you operate in a certain sector of the economy, let's assume maybe the agricultural sector, and you have a company, it's mandatory for you to go on the Ghana Stock Exchange. Is that a good way to grow the stock market in Ghana, or we should allow it to grow gradually, or as some would argue, organically from within? So companies warm up to it. The Ghana Stock Exchange does a lot of good branding, trying to attract companies, and we've seen that with the Ghana Alternative Exchange, where they are trying to get companies on board, small companies with the potential for growth on board. But should we start hammering companies? You know what? Get on a stock exchange or get out. Collins, should we get on a stock exchange by force, as we call it here, or we should get out? What do you think?
I think generally I would say that you can't let your listing be a compulsory thing for your economy. Mm-hmm. I'm asking myself, is this the stock exchange that should come and say, now everybody should come and list, or the government? It's something that globally it will be difficult for you to say you are making listing compulsory. Because I think if you say you want to list, one thing that you have to ask yourself, I mean, what's the objective of you listing? People want to go and list because they want to raise money. The stock market is one of the ways of raising money for business. Yeah. Okay. As much as people trade and make money also from secondary trading, when it comes to the company, its main motive is to go and get money to expand the business or to start the business. If the person has not got the need or the objective of raising money, and he has got the money already, I mean, what's the purpose for you to go and force him to go and list? Having said that, I think what I will probably want to say, add in addition, is the fact that as a growing economy, we expect government policies to support the development of the exchange. The policies we are looking at is a typical example that they gave with MTN. When MTN wanted a 4G, I mean, the government could refuse not to give the license, because he has the right. Then he says that, okay, if you want the license of the 4G, I also want to do this. That for me is more of a strategic way of helping, companies. Mm-hmm. And I would look at those policies geared towards the foreign, entities. rather than the locals.
So, like some form of local content.
Exactly the point.
Okay.
Exactly the point. In that case, then we know that, one, you are doing that to grow, let your local Ghanaians take advantage of the stock market or having more shares to trade or to make money on, and also retaining or maintaining your foreign exchange, exchange rate, which I think is better for the development of the nation as a whole. It's only in that context. So, and that one we should only look at only the telecommunication alone, but other, when we go to the other that we found, almost all the companies that are drilling are foreign companies. Yeah. Yes, government have equity, a stake, certain percentage of royalties and other things. Why can't we also ask them that as part of it, we still expect that at this point in time, you should offload, you should list this number of shares on the market so that Ghanaians can also benefit, in this whole discussion.
Let me throw you this argument. Some will argue that if you look at our economy, there's a dearth of available funds from individual investors, retail investors. And if you look at most of the companies that are listed on the stock exchange, you realize that SNIT is a shareholder in majority of them, let's say, and our pension funds and our life insurance companies. One would argue that we haven't developed our life insurance market, we haven't developed our pensions market. Individuals don't really understand what's going on, and even if the companies were supposed to flock to the stock market tomorrow, it's not everybody that can buy into it, because most of the purchases that are done are by institutional investors, and there's a dearth of available funds. Would you agree with that?
I think partly yes, partly no. Partly yes, in a sense that yes, maybe on the part of the stock exchange, much education has not been done to Ghanaian individual investors to look at it. So education for me is key. Okay. Though the Securities and Exchange Commission has their annual week celebration, financial literacy week celebration that sometimes they do to educate the Ghanaian populace to have financial understanding of this stock market and so on and so forth. On the other hand, if Ghanaian people also come to the market, buy shares, 1, 2, and it doesn't perform for them, they lose the interest.
Okay.
One, the outstanding number of shares that are available to trade is also a concern, because that triggers price appreciation or reduction.
And that's what some will use to characterize the market as illiquid.
Illiquid, exactly my point where I'm heading towards to. So if you don't have enough company listed that give volatility on the market, people don't show interest in doing that. A typical example, I think Anglo Gold, all of us were aware when they came to the market in those days, a lot of people bought into it. For years over years, they were not making any returns. I mean, if you've done such an investment before, what's the purpose of going to try another one again?
And again.
So I think that the illiquidity of the market also doesn't give, individual investors the opportunity. But now, I think per how we've structured our pensions, there's so much money, because it's also from the policy side.
21 billion in private pension funds, to be specific.
Now, from the policy side, from the pension regulator, there's a certain asset allocation that has to be in stocks.
Okay.
So per that, fund managers are more or less not forced in quote, but you are obliged to get some equities.
Yeah, true.
Per the asset allocation that you have to invest in. When I say asset allocation, means that how many stocks, how many investment can you buy?
How much are you putting into?
So
whether government bonds,
treasury bills, mutual funds, equity, and so on and so forth. Okay. So when you have a regulator having such a policy, it helps in developing that sector. Okay. And that's why I think that now, I mean, from employees' point of view, they contribute 5% to their second tier, to private tier 2, and that money definitely have to be invested. I believe that if this pension fund has not been there, this our consolidated, second thread of taking over Premium and Heritage Bank wouldn't have been solved, And I think it's a good, opportunity for us to look at. But equities have to be available for the funds to be able to invest in.
Okay, so just one more key thing with regards to the individual investors, institutional investors. one would argue that if you look at even with the institutional investors, very key point, one would argue that even the local ones, even if there's 21 billion of private pension funds sitting out there, and you look at the investment guidelines of the National Pensions Regulatory Authority, it's skewed towards government bonds, treasury bills, and less towards, yes, there's an allocation towards this. One would argue again that, you know what, most of these securities, bonds, stocks, etc., are bought by institutional investors of foreign origin. And therefore, even if they come into the market and they make some money, they'll have to return it to where it's coming from in foreign currency. What do you make of that argument?
I think for me, the asset allocation that they have, you see, pension monies, though we see it to be a long term, but they have an obligation at the end of a cycle. If you don't do the allocation right, such that it has some kind of security, in quote, security in the sense that, you know, when we are classifying assets, we have the one that are saying, we say equities are more risky, because equity, when you go and buy stock on the market, there's the tendency that the price could go down or could go up. If the price goes down, and assuming you're going to put 100% of somebody's pension money and everything is lost, you've affected the person. Yeah. And that's why when you are doing such asset allocation, you don't put much, more or less, into equity.
Okay.
Most of it is structured in the government side, because we know as for government bonds, and definitely government is going to pay. And that's why normally we say treasury bills are the most risk-free, in quote, though Greece have shown that sometimes government can default, you know,
can default
on their
loans.
Exactly. So for such a thing, I think it's understandable for institutional investors or even the regulator of pension to have such allocation when it comes to pension. But I think the point that you made, that last year, let me say, one of the main reasons which even stock exchange cited of our stock market not performing, you know, the way it has used to perform, was the fact that foreign investors started looking at or started moving their money from the local market to the international market, because the US dollar was being strengthened. Yeah. And if people have that as also an investment option, they will look at it from that angle, than coming to put in a risky market that anything at all can happen to their money. So if investors are being rational, depend on where people will take advantage if, you know, there's a return. But in addition to the return is only it's not only the only thing they look out for. They also look out for the security of it. So our stock market, I know, over the years has promised a huge return. Okay. People have enjoyed a lot of high returns. But in a situation where you see that almost huge percentage are in financial, you know, stocks, and these financial stocks, there's more or less, last year we were going through banking crisis and so on and so forth. Definitely, these investors to be smart and say, hey, we have to leave the market for now and move out till things become stabilized before we come on.
Okay, this is the business edition of PM Express, and my name is Philip Nanfuri. We'll take a quick break at this point. When we get back, we'll listen to Yolanda Cuba. She's the CEO of Vodafone Ghana, as to exactly what she has to say about this 4G license and listing on the Ghana Stock Exchange. Welcome back from the break. This is the business edition of PM Express. My name is Philip Nanfuri, and my guest, Collins Appiah, who is a financial economist. And before we went on the break, he was just taking us through some of the dynamics of how exactly investors will look at the equity markets, where the money is going, where the money is not going. Just to be clear, the Ghana Stock Exchange hasn't said any company should compulsory list, or there hasn't been any clear-cut policy on that. Of course, as a regulator of the stock exchange, they would like to see more companies on the stock exchange. So that's why they are putting in place incentives and trying to ginger up, if I can use that word, investors and companies to come on the stock exchange. Now, I'd like us to hear from Yolanda Cuba. She's the CEO of Vodafone Ghana. She had a discussion with my colleague George Raphael on exactly what their 4G license meant and how it's going to come with this more or less listing on the stock exchange or not. Let's take a listen to her.
In terms of the 4G requirements from the regulator, we actually were required to have a minimum of 25% local shareholding. And government has 30% of Vodafone Ghana and therefore qualifies and as confirmed by the regulator in terms of that requirement. So the whole issue around listing or not listing, that is a commercial issue for us rather than a regulatory issue.
Someone asking again, the whole debate right now is, what was the text of that licensing document that was approved by NCA? What did it actually say with respect to having this 4G LTE and then giving a fraction of the business to Ghanaians? So
it actually said you have to have 25% local shareholding. That's it. And local shareholding, government is local, and therefore it's owned by Ghanaians. Yeah.
So I'm saying that is quite debatable because we've had instances where government had interest in other companies, but they still went public to ensure that the retail investors like me get an opportunity to share in the fortunes of that company. And the same cannot be equated with government having either 20 or 25% stake in Vodafone Ghana.
So there's a difference between regulatory requirements for the LTE spectrum and a commercial decision on whether you should list or not. The regulator has never said to anyone that in order to acquire a 4G license, you actually have to be listed. So there is no such requirement from the regulator. It was a commercial decision made by the management and the shareholders of the business. Yeah.
And therefore, do you believe that government having that stake in Vodafone Ghana equates Ghanaians holding that interest in Vodafone?
Absolutely. I mean, government owns the shares on behalf of Ghanaians. Government is not an entity that is there on its own. You know, it doesn't live on by itself, right? So everything government owns is actually owned by the people of Ghana. So from that perspective, yes. I mean, if you're asking me a different question, which is would shareholders of Vodafone Ghana, including government and Vodafone PLC, would they consider a listing so that Ghanaians can participate at a retail level? That is a different kind of conversation that could be made in time. Yeah.
In your statement, you made it clear that Vodafone Ghana is not averse to going public and possibly listing on the Ghana Stock Exchange. But when you go through the statement again and previous comment for Vodafone Ghana, some will say it defeats this whole argument about Vodafone Ghana being averse to going public.
No, I mean, as you said, the statement actually says we're not averse to going public. It is a commercial decision. It is not a regulatory requirement, and that's really what's been the issue, is whether it's a regulatory requirement or it's a commercial decision. This one is a commercial decision. And as you say, the statement was very clear that we are not averse to actually to a listing. However, it has to be in the right environment and in the right context as well.
And when would Vodafone Ghana see the right environment, the right context with good financials to say that, okay, as a commercial decision, I want retail Ghanaians to share in the fortunes of Vodafone Ghana by owning a stake?
So, I mean, you have to look at the sustainability of the business, the investment cycle of the business, how much capex is required in order to grow the business and so on, and look at the requirements of the business and then decide then when is the right time to list. And normally what happens is that management, which is me, and the team actually make a recommendation to shareholders, and the shareholders decide. So it's not up to management to decide, but rather up to shareholders to decide on a listing.
Economists always say that all other things being equal, if you look at the way the company is growing, when would you deem as a right period, not date, that possibly it can be considered that let's go public and let George Afi be a part shareholder of Vodafone Ghana?
So that would be very difficult, George. It would be very difficult to say.
It means that it's not on the books.
As I stand here today, there are a number of things that we're trying to resolve. For example, we've spoken about previously our balance sheet restructure, which we are on the tail end of. There's a couple of things that we're dealing with from an assessed loss perspective, because the Ghana Stock Exchange has certain requirements in terms of that as well. So we have to meet a number of prerequisites to just consider a listing. And at this stage, we are not meeting all the prerequisites for a listing.
So if in the next 5 years, all those conditions are met, the market could be considered?
The shareholders can definitely consider anything.
How is your 4G process going? Are we on track?
We are on track on the 4G process. We are trying to deploy as quick as we possibly can. So that one is on course. Yeah.
And then possibly, are we hoping that by April this year would happen?
As I said, Q2 this year. That's really my.
So that's Yolanda Cuba. She's the CEO of Vodafone Ghana Limited. Very interesting thoughts there and a lot to wrap our head around. Collins, key issues come up in Yolanda's submissions. First one, she says, you know what, Vodafone Ghana is not adverse to a listing in the Ghana Stock Exchange. But for now, it's not something that they are going to consider. And she made it clear that in getting their license, the 4G license, nowhere did it say that they should list before they get that license. And that already the Ghana government of Ghana, owns 30% of Vodafone Ghana. And this is being held on behalf of you and I sitting right here. She also makes a key point: regulatory reasons for listing and a commercial reason for listing. And the last one I would like to throw in is what she talks about. Yes, giving Ghanaians opportunity to buy into it. But I see from here that there are two things that come to play out here. An IPO that will put you on the local bears or the stock exchange, and a private placement as to where you can gather a few investors that will give you this money without necessarily going through the hustle and bustle of a stock exchange. Put all this, please, into context for us.
Okay, so I think listening to her, it becomes so clear. At first, I was asking myself, what is exactly the policy that NCA, which is National Communication Authority, has got for these telcos? She stated that the policy is actually for you to have the 4G, you just need to have 25% local content, Ghanaian local content. Yeah. It means that it doesn't really matter, it has to be listed or it's not listed. And for them, so far as government already has 30%, it meets the requirement of the Ghanaian ownership. When MTN brought their prospectus, one of the reasons that they cited in doing one of the reasons they cited in coming to do the IPO was that in getting the license, the regulator, which is the NCA, wanted them to get 35% Ghanaian ownership, and therefore they decided to come and do an IPO rather than a private placement. Yes. An IPO, as you explained from the beginning of the discussion, is where the company is trying to come and raise funds for the first time on the primary market. If you don't do that, then probably an advisor can take you and say, okay, if you want to still get money, raise money, you go and speak to one of you invested behind the scene and do a private placement for them. I think from what he's saying, it's so clear that, they won't be forced to list unless government, who is also a shareholder of the Vodafone, decide, okay, I want to offload my part on the market. Exactly. Okay. And that one, and that's what I think the MD of Stock Exchange was actually calling for. Instead of government holding it and money coming to the government coffers, blah, 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 give it to individuals, One, the advantage is that the dividend that they will declare will come to these individuals. These individuals will trade on the secondary market, make extra money, and still do extra business with the money that they've made and pay you more taxes, rather than the few dividend that you are getting from just 30% of it. So if you look at the economic turnaround of you coming to list on the market, the advantage of it, it's probably people think that it's more better than just you owning directly from Vodafone. And that's what I think, the woman, is making.
And she made another key point about the restructuring of their balance sheet. And we've seen the Ghana Stock Exchange go hard on some companies because they have not tidied up their financials. And essentially, that is in contravention to the listing rules of the Ghana Stock Exchange. when she talks about restructuring balance sheets to the uneducated or the uninitiated, what does a restructuring of a balance sheet mean?
Okay. So before I touch on the balance sheet, let me say that I think in lesson, there's a sort of requirement that you need to go through. Your balance sheet not being good, in quote, is actually not something stock exchange can say, because your balance sheet is not good, I will not allow you to list, provided that you fulfill all other requirements. The reason why when your balance sheet is not good, it doesn't, in quote, make sense for you to come and list is because investors are going to look at those balance sheets to determine whether they want to buy your shares or not to buy. So for you to be successful, one key thing that investors will be looking out for is the balance sheet. The balance sheet shows the assets and liability of the company, which now they say the financial position. You know, when the banks were collapsing, one of the reasons Bank of Ghana was giving was the fact that companies, in quote, were insolvent.
Yeah.
When you say you are insolvent, it means that you have a liability. Liability are money that you've taken from people or from institutions, being more than the asset that you've created with. You get it? So anytime the liability becomes more than the asset, then it means that depending on how long you can fill the gap, you have become insolvent. Different from a liquidity position where maybe in banking, maybe somebody walks into your bank and probably you don't have cash. Meanwhile, the cash has been invested in an asset that is not liquid for you. That's also a difference. So when you come into the market and your balance, the financial statement doesn't look good, it's going to be obvious that, you know, investors will not be trading on your equity, and therefore it's probably not good to come, or you won't be successful even on the IPO from the IPO angle. If you don't have that, what can you do? The best thing to do is probably to restructure the balance sheet, look at it. I've actually not seen, and as we said, because they are not public, they don't show you their financial statement.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't know how the balance sheet looks like, and they are trying to restructure it. You know, but the fact that they say they want to restructure it, it just tells me that the balance sheet doesn't look like a financial a good book that investors will have the confidence to buy when they come to the market.
Okay, that's a very good one. That's a very good one. Just as we draw down on our discussion, we're in the second month of the year. On the stock market, where do you see the markets going? Because I remember last year, and I think the year before, when we started, the stock market of Ghana was at an all-time high globally. And as the year progressed, it came down. Now we have a cut in monetary policy rates. We see interest rates generally trending downwards. Treasury bills also looking a bit funny. One would argue that conventionally, people should flock from money market instruments, that's the treasury bills, bonds, to the stock market. Do you see that in the months ahead?
Okay, so I think in forecasting how the market is going to be, I would say, you recall in 2017, the stock market was one of the best stock or gave the best returns on the market. I always say that if you're able to predict how Ghanaian economy, the GDP is going to be, you can predict how the stock market will also perform. This year, my prediction is that the market will definitely return a positive returns on the market. My reason being that last year, from the beginning, we were in positive. We got even to about 30-something%. Then getting to July and ending to December thereabout, you know, because of the financial crisis that the banks were going through.
Okay.
And the banks were the majority, you know, stocks on the market. It just wiped almost all the gains that we've made.
Okay. So, Colin sees some positive gains for the stock market in the coming months. This has been the business edition of PM Express with me, Philip Nanfuri, and my guest, Colin Sapia. I hope we've made you better informed when it comes to the stock market and all it entails, and whether it's prudent for companies to either list compulsorily or not. I thank you for your time. Have a good night.